Investigated following a BBC investigation earlier this year, which revealed that some migrants were being provided taxis to travel long distances, with fares often costing hundreds of pounds. The government says almost £16 million a year is spent on transport for asylum seekers. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney said the blame lay with the Home Office.
You've got to have accessible healthcare services for asylum seekers. Don't send asylum seekers to places where it's impossible for them to access public services, because what you will then do is feed stories where the Home Office are making a big song and dance about clamping down on taxi use, when in fact it's the chaotic arrangements of the Home Office that have fueled that in the first place.
Jeremy Corbyn has called for unity at the first conference of the new party he's co-founded with the former Labour MP Zara Sultana. Currently called Your Party, the left-wing movement has suffered from infighting, fallouts and allegations of a power struggle since it was first set up. Speaking to a packed hall in Liverpool, Mr Corbyn, a former Labour leader, said the party had an opportunity to bring people together. Thousands of planes are being returned to normal service after being grounded for hours by airlines around the world. The action was taken after Airbus warned its A320 planes could malfunction due to interference from solar radiation. Disruption has been limited at UK airports. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia targeted Kiev and other areas in an overnight attack using nearly 600 drones and dozens of missiles. Mr Zelensky said at least 3 people were killed in the attacks and more than 600,000 were left without power. The UK's leading adoption charity is calling for a full review of support for adoptive parents following a BBC investigation. It found more than 1,000 adopted children had been returned to care over the past 5 years. Adoption UK said more families than ever before were in crisis. Anthony Albanese has become Australia's first leader to get married while in office. The Prime Minister tied the knot with his partner, Jodie Hayden, at a private ceremony in Canberra. Mr Albanese's dog, Toto, was given the job of ring bearer. And the weather. Rain will continue in the north of England and the Midlands this afternoon before clearing away to the east. Elsewhere, mainly dry with the odd bright spell, but wintry showers in Northern Ireland and Scotland. Top temperatures of 12 Celsius in London, 12 in Cardiff, 7 in Belfast and 6 in Edinburgh. BBC News at 2.5 minutes past 1. And now, Music Matters. The composer and conductor James Macmillan begins a 6-week journey through the biblical story of creation in the book of Genesis. And today we begin in darkness.
As a composer, I've spent so much of my life feeling the compulsion to make music. But what is the genesis of this music? And how much of that process of inspiration and invention is entwined with the allegory of God's great act of creation, which, in Scripture, unfolds over 6 days to form the heavens and the earth, the skies and the seas, nature and humanity. I'm James Macmillan. I'm a composer, a conductor, and I'm also a Catholic. Although I've written lots of both sacred and secular music, my creative process and my faith are deeply connected, and over the next 6 weeks, I'm exploring how the creation story, told in the book of Genesis, has, one way or another, inspired centuries of composers. I've invited friends and colleagues to reflect not only on the music inspired by the book of Genesis, but to think about the very nature of creativity itself. Where does inspiration come from? And how do our varied outlooks affect the art we make? So let's begin at the beginning, with the first page of the Bible and day 1 of the creation, read by the former Archbishop of Canterbury and poet, Dr. Rowan Williams.
In the beginning, when God created the heaven and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day.
The daily rising of the sun is probably our most constant reminder of God's creation. Here's Rowan Williams again.
The strange thing about the relation between darkness and light is that while they seem to be opposites, in practice, what is the exact moment when night turns to day? When is dawn? The processes of creation are so continuous, so seamless, and that's something which is fascinating to try and capture in word or music. And, of course, the beginning of Haydn's creation is an attempt to capture that.
The introduction from Haydn's creation, written in 1798 and performed by the Handel and Haydn Society, conducted by Harry Christophers. Well, I suppose it goes right back to the beginning. There's something about the Big Bang, that is, the making of the universe, the making of the world, that can't help but have a connection with the desire of artists to make what we make. So I'm very keen to pursue the question, is there something in the beginning of it all, the making of the world, the creation story, that has some kind of resonance with what artists do, and in particular, the creation of music, which is my job? O Radiant Dawn, that's one of the Strathclyde motets, written by me, James Macmillan, which presents Jesus as the light shining upon the world, bringing light to those in darkness. It was sung by the choir of Merton College, Oxford, directed by Benjamin Nicholas. There's something about the artist's mindset, or let's say soul set, which responds instinctively, deeply, compulsively, even to the dawn of creation. And one of the questions I've always asked myself as a composer is, do artists, in their own hunger to create beauty, sense that the origins of this lie in the very act of creation itself? I suppose the religious among us would see God's hand in this, but I'm sure there are many more who would want to interrogate it in a different way. I'm keen to understand more about what theologians think about the creative impulse, which brings me to my next guest.
My name is Margarita Mooney Clayton. I'm a professor at the Princeton Theological Seminary and a research fellow at Blackfriars Hall in Oxford University. The story in the book of Genesis is this idea that God goes into the world and creates out of a formless void and brings light into darkness. So the book of Genesis is a way of thinking about the origins, but also in a way that points to this ongoing act of creation and poses, I think, a lot of questions about, after this initial act of creation in the Garden of Eden, what then are human beings called to do? And what I hope we get to in this conversation is to ponder human co-creation with God as a furthering of this initial act of creation by the hand of God that sustains us in all that we do, but also invites us to continue this act of creation and ordering of the world.
Chaos, tamed into harmonic order by Jean-Ferry Rebel. That was the opening movement from his ballet Les Éléments, which was performed by Musica Antiqua Köln and directed by Reinhard Goebel. I want this series to be more than a discussion of the literal themes and literal imagery within Genesis, because people of faith think of it as much more than that. This was something I put to Rowan Williams. I want to refer initially, Rowan, to an interview with you where the then editor of The Guardian asked you this question. Are you comfortable with teaching creationism? Now, my question to you is, did that annoy you?
I was a bit annoyed, I suppose, because one of the things that gets thrown around at religious people is, oh, you believe in creationism rather than creation. Mm-hmm. So creationism seems to me to be a kind of category mistake. It's treating the biblical story as if it were simple reportage, rather than treating that story as a vivid, intensely imagined picture of the dependence of everything on God and the interdependence of everything on everything else.
And so, if you were in a position of trying to explain the creation, how would you begin to do that?
I'd begin by saying, let's look at what goes on when human beings try to put something new into the world. It's not just taking something out of nothing. It's working with the grain and the flow of what's there, and then saying, you know, this could add up to something that we haven't seen or heard or experienced before. Now, creation works like that for us, I think. But what we say about God's creation is that every bit of that intersecting, interacting world of making things new, all of that goes back to one initial act of newness. And everything, as it were, runs back to that literally unimaginable in the beginning.